Hello, welcome back to ZzScience. Tonight, we're going to talk about what happens when the sun sets and the savanna slowly changes. Not the dramatic version you might have seen in nature documentaries, where everything is tension and close calls and urgent music. This is quieter than that. This is the actual texture of those hours, the way the light shifts, the way the air moves differently, the way certain animals begin to stir while others settle in and wait for morning. We're going to spend some time with lions tonight. Not because they are the most powerful animal, or the most fearsome, or the most anything really, but because they are, in a very specific and biological sense, designed for this, for the dark, for the hours when the sun is gone and the savanna becomes a different kind of place entirely. And to understand them properly, to understand why they move the way they move, why they wait the way they wait, why they do almost nothing for long stretches and then do something very precise, you have to start before any of that. You have to start with the environment itself, with what the savanna actually is when day ends. So let's begin there. Let's begin with the light. There is a moment in the late afternoon on the African savanna when the quality of sunlight changes in a way that is hard to describe if you have never seen it. The light becomes almost horizontal. It comes in low and long across the grass, and it turns everything a particular shade of amber and gold that is genuinely beautiful, but also, functionally, disorienting. Shadows stretch out to extraordinary lengths. A small rock can cast a shadow 10 meters long. A lone acacia tree can make the ground around it almost unrecognizable compared to how it looked at noon. Animals respond to this. Not all of them consciously, of course. Not in the way a person might notice the time and think, well, it's getting late. But in a biological sense, in the sense of circadian rhythms and hormonal shifts and evolved responses to light levels, most animals on the savanna are paying attention to this transition in some way. Their bodies are registering it, even when their minds, to whatever extent animals have minds in the way we think of them, are doing something else entirely. The temperature change is the other big signal. The savanna can be brutally hot during the day. Midday temperatures in the East African savanna regularly exceed 35 degrees Celsius, and in some regions can push past 40. The ground itself, which absorbs heat all day, radiates it back upward. Animals that are out in the open during these hours are working constantly just to stay at a safe body temperature. Zebras, wildebeest, impala, they often seek shade during the hottest part of the day, standing in clusters beneath the few trees available, barely moving, conserving whatever moisture and energy they can. Lions do this too, perhaps even more dramatically. A lion in the midday heat is almost a different animal from a lion at night. They are sprawled and loose and deeply, profoundly asleep. Their breathing is slow. Their ears might flick occasionally to register a sound, but their bodies are committed to rest in a way that is almost absolute. They are not being lazy in any meaningful sense. They are being efficient. They are saving energy for the hours when it will actually be useful. And as that golden afternoon light begins to fade, as the shadows merge and the temperature starts to drop even slightly, something shifts. It is subtle. You would not necessarily notice it if you were watching a pride and you were not paying close attention. But the quality of their sleep changes. The shallowness returns. An ear moves more often. A tail begins to flick. One lion, usually an adult female, might raise her head and look around at nothing in particular, or at least nothing visible to a human observer, and then lower it again. But she has registered something. The light level, the temperature. some combination of environmental signals that her nervous system has been calibrated over millions of years to notice. The day is ending, the night is coming, and her body knows this before she is fully awake. Let's talk about the savanna at night for a moment, because it is genuinely different from what most people imagine. The word savanna tends to conjure a particular image: open grassland, flat, dry, maybe a few scattered trees. And that image is not wrong, exactly, but it is incomplete. The savanna is not a uniform landscape. It is deeply varied. There are areas of dense bush, thick enough that visibility drops to a few meters. There are riverbeds and drainage channels that are almost invisible from a distance, but which create corridors of thicker vegetation and, during certain seasons, water. There are rocky outcrops, kopjes they're called, that rise suddenly from the flat ground and create their own miniature ecosystems, with different temperatures and different animals. At night, all of these features take on new significance. The open grassland, which seems so exposed during the day, becomes something else after dark. The grass itself, which might be waist height or taller, depending on the season, creates a kind of visual confusion for animals moving through it. The wind moves through it in ways that carry scent and mask sound. The ground is uneven in ways that daylight makes obvious, but darkness makes treacherous. And the darkness itself is not uniform. On a clear night, the African sky is genuinely extraordinary. The Milky Way visible in a way that most people who have grown up in cities never see it. The stars dense enough to cast a faint light of their own. The moon, when it is full or near full, changes everything. Animals behave differently in bright moonlight. Studies of various species have shown measurable differences in movement, foraging behavior, and predator-prey interactions depending on lunar phase. Some prey animals are significantly more cautious during full moon nights. They have more light, yes, but so do predators. During the new moon, or when cloud cover is heavy, the darkness can be genuinely profound. Standing still on the savanna on a moonless night with your eyes fully adjusted, a process that takes roughly 20 to 30 minutes for human eyes, you can make out shapes and movement, but with limited clarity and range. Large objects are visible, motion is detectable, but fine detail is largely gone. For lions, this kind of darkness is not limiting, it is advantageous. And to understand why, you need to understand something about how their eyes are built. The lion eye is not radically different from the human eye in its basic architecture. They have the same fundamental structures: cornea, lens, retina, optic nerve. But within that structure, there are differences that are significant enough to produce very different visual experiences. The most important of these is the tapetum lucidum. This is a reflective layer located behind the retina. When light enters the eye and passes through the retina without being absorbed, which happens with some percentage of incoming light even in well-adapted eyes, the tapetum reflects it back through the retina a second time. This effectively gives the photoreceptors a second chance to catch that light. It roughly doubles the amount of light the retina processes under low light conditions. This is the structure that causes what people sometimes call eye shine, the glowing eyes you see in photographs when a flash is used, or when a car's headlights catch an animal in the dark. The light enters, reflects off the tapetum, and comes back out. In lions, this eye shine tends to be greenish or yellowish. In other animals it varies. Cats often show a similar green, while deer may show orange or red, depending on the specific structure of their tapetum. Humans do not have a tapetum. Lucidum. We lack this layer entirely. What this means in practical terms is that in low light conditions, lions are processing significantly more available light than we are. Their visual sensitivity at night is substantially greater than ours. The second major difference is in the distribution of photoreceptors on the retina. The retina contains two main types of light-sensitive cells: rods and cones. Cones are responsible for color vision and fine detail, and they require relatively bright light to function. Rods are responsible for low light vision. They are much more sensitive to light, but do not distinguish color and do not produce the same fine resolution that cones do. Lions have a higher density of rods relative to cones compared to humans. They have more of the cells that work in darkness. The trade-off is that their daytime vision, their color vision particularly, is less rich than ours. Lions are believed to perceive a more limited color palette than humans. Where we might see a rich green and a contrasting brown, a lion might see less distinct hues. But at night, when color vision is largely irrelevant anyway, since all photoreceptors require some minimum light level to function, and below that threshold, even human rod cells give us a very limited sense of color. The lion's eye is clearly the better instrument. Their pupils are also capable of dilating more fully than human pupils in low light, allowing more light to enter the eye overall. The combination of larger effective pupil size, denser rod distribution, and the reflective tapetum produces an animal that can see, with reasonable clarity and detail, in conditions that would leave a human nearly blind. This is not magic. It is anatomy. It is the accumulated result of evolutionary pressure acting on populations over millions of years, selecting for individuals whose visual systems functioned well at night, because those individuals were better hunters, better at finding food, better at surviving and reproducing. The lions alive today are the descendants of animals for whom darkness was useful rather than threatening. As the sun drops below the horizon and the last light fades from orange to grey to the deep blue of early night, the savanna's acoustic environment changes dramatically. During the day, the sounds are dominated by birds. The number of bird species on the East African savanna is extraordinary. Hundreds of species, many of them highly vocal. Weavers and starlings and hornbills and warblers and a dozen other families create a constant background of chirping, chattering, calling, and alarm-giving that begins before sunrise and continues until well after dark. But the peak of bird vocal activity is the daytime, and as light fades, species after species goes quiet. What takes their place is insect sound. The grasslands at night produce a wall of sound from crickets, cicadas, and various other species that are mostly or entirely inactive during the day. This sound is not random. It is species-specific, with each species producing a characteristic frequency and pattern. It functions for communication within species, for mate location and territory signaling, but it also creates a background noise that affects how other sounds travel and are perceived across the landscape. This matters for predator-prey interactions in ways that are not obvious at first. The insect sound is relatively constant and comes from everywhere. It is omnidirectional and does not carry information about specific locations or movements. But sounds that originate above it, the footfall of a large animal, the snapping of a branch, the exhalation of breath, carry differently. Against that background noise, a sudden silence is actually more noticeable than a sound. When prey animals are moving through grass, and their footsteps have been generating a soft, regular rhythm, any interruption in that rhythm, a pause, a change in pace, can carry information. Sound also behaves differently at night in terms of how far it travels. Cooler night air tends to be denser than the hot daytime air, and this affects acoustic propagation. Sounds can travel farther and with less distortion under calm, cool conditions. This is one reason why lion roars, which we will come back to later, are so effective as long-distance communication tools and are predominantly performed at night and in the early morning hours. The temperature drop itself continues through the night. In many savanna regions, the difference between the daytime high and the nighttime low can be 15 degrees Celsius or more. Near the equator, this can bring nighttime temperatures into the low 20s or even the high teens on some nights. For an animal as large as a lion, adults typically weigh between 120 and 190 kilograms for females and 150 to 250 kilograms for males. This is not threatening. Large body mass means a large thermal mass, and cooling is slower. But it does mean that the sheer energetic cost of moving around is lower at night than during the day. The same distance traveled costs less in water loss, less in metabolic effort, when the temperature is 22 degrees than when it is 38. This is a non-trivial advantage for a predator whose hunting strategy depends on sustained, deliberate movement over long distances. There is a particular quality to how a pride of lions moves when night is newly established and they are becoming active after their long afternoon rest. It is not the urgent, purposeful movement of an animal that knows exactly where it is going. It is something more exploratory, more tentative in its pace, while paradoxically being completely relaxed in its body language. Lions do not telegraph stress in the way many other animals do. They do not exhibit the constant low-level alertness of prey species, the frequent head raising, the ear rotation, the scanning for threats. This is partly because they are, in their ecological context, largely free from the threat of predation themselves. Adult lions have essentially no natural predators. Spotted hyenas will sometimes mob and kill lions, particularly injured or isolated individuals, and there are documented cases of Cape buffalo killing lions. Nile crocodiles have killed lions at water crossings, but in general, an adult lion is not an animal that needs to spend significant neurological resources watching for things that might eat it. This produces a distinctive quality of movement, relaxed but observant. Covering ground without apparent urgency, but covering it efficiently. The head position is low and forward, the gaze ranging across a wide field. The tail moves, often slowly, not in the tight, rapid lashing of a hunting cat in close proximity to prey, but in a loose, almost pendular swing. When a pride begins to move after their afternoon rest, they often travel together, but loosely, not in a tight cluster. The females, who do the majority of the pride's hunting, may spread out into a loose fan formation as they move through an area. Each animal covering slightly different ground, each registering different information from its immediate environment. A lion's nose is involved in all of this. Olfaction is significant for lions, though probably less dominant than vision and hearing compared to some other predators like wild dogs or wolves. They can detect scent marks left by other lions. These are important for territorial and social communication. They can detect the presence of prey through ambient scent, particularly when wind direction is favorable. But it is worth pausing on what favorable wind means in this context. A lion moving across the savanna is not simply walking from A to B and hoping the wind cooperates. There is a constant, usually subtle, adjustment happening, an orientation toward available scent information, an avoidance of positions that would put the lion's own scent downwind of prey it has not yet located. This is not conscious calculation in the sense of working through options. It is more like a physical habit, a set of behavioral tendencies that have been shaped by what worked in past situations, and, before that, by what worked in the evolutionary past of the species. Watch a lion moving across open ground at night, and you are watching something that is simultaneously doing nothing remarkable, just walking, and doing something extraordinarily refined. Every step is placed. Every change of direction has a cause, even if that cause is not visible to an observer. The prey animals of the savanna have not been passive in this evolutionary story. They have been experiencing the same pressures, the same selection acting on the same populations over the same timescales. What makes lion predation work at all? What makes it possible for a predator species to coexist indefinitely with prey species, rather than simply hunting them to extinction, is that the prey have also developed countermeasures, not through planning or awareness, but through the same process of differential survival. In the early hours of night, the savanna's prey animals enter a different behavioral mode than the one they occupy during the day. This is not a simple binary. It is not as if they are relaxed during the day and terrified at night. The situation is more nuanced. During the heat of the day, many prey species rest and reduce their exposure. But they rest in positions that offer good sight lines, often with multiple animals positioned to cover different directions. Their resting is never fully unconscious in the way a lion's deep midday sleep appears to be. They are always partly on watch. At night, the dynamic shifts in specific ways. Hearing becomes more important. Smell becomes more important. The formations prey animals adopt change. Herds of zebra and wildebeest tend to be more compact at night than during the day, which might seem counterintuitive, given that spreading out would allow more ground coverage. But compactness at night has specific advantages. It reduces the number of exposed edges. It means more ears and noses are concentrated in a smaller area. And it means that any alarm given by one animal is immediately communicated to many others. The collective nervous system of a prey herd at night is a genuinely interesting thing. Individual animals are processing sensory information continuously. Slight sounds, movement of air, the scent of grass and dust, and, potentially, predator. When one animal raises its head sharply, others often do the same within a second or two, even if they have not themselves detected anything concerning. There is information in the behavior of other animals, and herd species have become very good at reading it. This makes lion hunting at night a more complex task than it might appear. It is not simply a matter of having better eyesight and therefore being able to see targets that cannot see back. The prey are not blind. Their night vision is also adapted, not as specialized as the lion's, but functional. More importantly, their other senses are running continuously, and their collective behavior means that a single alarm response can cascade through a herd in seconds, converting a potential ambush into a general flight before a lion has come close to striking distance. The fact that lions hunt successfully under these conditions, not constantly, not every night, not even most nights, but with enough regularity to sustain individual animals and prides, says something about the refinement of their approach. It is not brute force. It is not simply seeing better in the dark and charging. It requires patience, positioning, coordination among pride members, and a kind of repeated recalibration in response to how prey are moving and behaving. The pace of a hunt's beginning, if the word beginning even captures something that starts so gradually, is one of the harder things to convey if you have only seen edited wildlife footage. Documentary films, by necessity, condense time. They show you the stalk, then the charge, then the outcome. What they almost never have the time to show you is the extended period before any of that. The period that can last an hour or 2 hours or more, during which nothing dramatic happens at all. Lions that are beginning to orient toward prey often do it in ways that look indistinguishable from lions that are just walking. They may rest for 20 minutes, then rise and move a short distance, then rest again. The direction of their movement changes subtly. They become slightly lower in their posture. The pauses become longer. The eyes are more consistently forward, more fixed. There is a concept in behavioral ecology called the predatory sequence, sometimes called the prey sequence in older literature, which describes the series of behavioral stages that a predator moves through in the process of making a kill. For lions, this typically includes detect, orient, stalk, chase, catch, kill. But the transition from detect to orient can be extraordinarily prolonged, and the transition from orient to stalk can be even more so. These are not discrete steps with clear boundaries. They shade into each other, and they can cycle backward. A lion that has begun a stalk may pause and return to a resting position if conditions change. A lion that has oriented toward a distant group of prey may wait for an hour before taking any further action. What is happening during that waiting period? Quite a lot, probably. The lion is gathering information. Wind direction can shift multiple times in an hour, and each shift changes both what the lion can smell and what direction it would be most advantageous to approach from. The prey may move, drifting in their grazing or shifting their resting position, which changes the distance and the geometry of any potential approach. Other lions in the pride may be doing things that are relevant, moving into positions, whether by coordination or individually arrived at decisions, that create tactical possibilities. And the lion itself is resting its muscles, conserving energy, not rushing, allowing the situation to develop in whatever direction it develops. This is not strategic thinking in the human sense, but it is not nothing. It is behavior that has been calibrated by selection to produce outcomes, successful hunts, more often than other possible behaviors would produce them. The patience is functional, the waiting has value, and it happens in the dark, mostly invisible to anything watching from a distance. There is something worth saying here about the social structure of a lion pride and how it operates specifically during nighttime activity. A pride is a relatively stable group, and in many ways it is unusual among cat species. Most cats are primarily solitary hunters: tigers, leopards, cheetahs. The lion's social grouping is an exception within the family Felidae, and it is not entirely clear why it evolved or what the primary advantages of it are, since lions hunt both collectively and singly, depending on circumstances. There are several hypotheses: defense of large carcasses from competitors like hyenas, defense of territory, cooperative cub rearing, and none of them is universally accepted as the dominant explanation. What is clear is that the pride functions as a unit in specific ways during the night. The adult females of the pride, who are typically related, often sisters and cousins and aunts and adult daughters, have established relationships with each other that are expressed in their coordinated movement. They know each other's tendencies. They recognize each other's behavior as meaningful signals. When one female changes her body posture in a particular way, others nearby may respond even without being aware of any external stimulus. They are responding to the change in their companion. This is coordination without explicit communication. It is not that the lions are talking to each other about the hunt in any symbolic sense, but their shared attention, their collective focus on the same prey, from slightly different positions and angles, creates a kind of distributed awareness that is more effective than any single animal's perception would be. The spatial arrangements that emerge during a hunt are not random. Studies of lion hunting behavior have documented that pride members during coordinated hunts tend to adopt what researchers describe as wing positions. Some individuals moving to flank the prey, while one or more remain closer to center. This flanking behavior increases the chance that prey fleeing in any direction will encounter a lion. It creates situations where prey cannot simply run toward the horizon without complication. Whether this spatial arrangement results from deliberate coordination, whether lions plan their hunt positions, is genuinely contested. Some researchers have argued that what looks like strategy can be explained by individual animals simply responding to the same environmental cues and the same prey behavior, with each lion doing what is individually advantageous given its current position. Others have suggested there is something more active in the coordination, something that cannot be explained purely by individual optimization. The honest answer is that we do not fully know. What we can say is that prides that hunt together are successful more often than lions that hunt alone, particularly for large prey like buffalo and zebra, and that the patterns of movement during a hunt are not random. There is structure in them. Whether that structure is planned or emergent, it is real. The female lions that do the majority of hunting in a pride are not the largest or most visually striking members of the group. That designation goes to the adult males with their distinctive manes. But the male's role in the nighttime economy of the pride is quite different from what their visual prominence might suggest. Adult males in a pride spend even more time resting than females. Their contribution to hunting is limited. They do hunt, and in certain circumstances, they hunt very specifically. Male lions are proportionally more involved in hunting large, dangerous prey like buffalo and, in some populations, giraffe. But they hunt less frequently than females and contribute less of the overall prey taken by the pride. Their energetic expenditure on a typical night is lower than that of the hunting females. What males invest their energy in, particularly at night, is territorial maintenance and assertion. The lion's roar is one of the most distinctive sounds in the animal kingdom and serves a specific function in this context. It is a long-distance communication signal. Adult male lions can produce a roar audible to humans at roughly 8 kilometers. To other lions, with their more sensitive hearing, the effective range is probably greater. The roar conveys identity. Lions that know each other's voices can distinguish them, and it conveys presence. It declares that this territory is occupied, that there are resident males here. Roaring primarily happens at night. The acoustic advantages of cooler, denser air mean that the signal travels farther and more clearly than it would during the heat of the day. And nightly territorial vocalization is not simply a declaration of presence, it is a practice. Males that roar regularly maintain a kind of sonic claim on their territory that has real effects on the behavior of neighboring lions and potentially intruding males. The females pay attention to these roars too. They can distinguish the voices of their pride's males, and they can assess from roars whether foreign males are in the area. This information affects their behavior. Females with young cubs are particularly responsive to the presence of unfamiliar male voices, because infanticide by incoming males is a real threat in lions' social biology. So, on any given night, the pride is doing several things simultaneously. Females may be on the move, orienting toward prey, beginning the long process of a hunt. Males may be resting for long stretches and then rising to roar, to patrol specific boundary areas, to scent mark trees and rocks and the ground with urine. Younger animals, subadults and yearlings, are watching, following, beginning to learn through proximity and observation what the adults around them do. The night is full. Not dramatically, not loudly, but full. Let's slow down and spend some time with the savanna at roughly midnight, the deepest part of the night, well past the transition period, when the diurnal animals have been asleep for hours and the night-active species are in full operation. The temperature at this hour is as low as it will get before dawn. Begins its gradual warming. The insect chorus is still present, but may be somewhat muted compared to early evening. Temperature affects insect activity too, and below a certain threshold, some species reduce their calling or stop entirely. The grass is moist with dew in many regions. Evaporative cooling during the night draws moisture from the air onto cold surfaces, and the long grass blades hold this moisture, which means that animals moving through the grass are both dampened and made more audible to anything listening carefully. At this hour, the lions of a pride might be in several different states. Some may be resting. The hunt can involve long periods of inactivity, broken by brief, intense action, and a lion that has not found an opportunity to hunt effectively might settle back into a resting posture and sleep lightly while companions continue to be active. Some may be actively moving, covering ground. Some might be in the later stages of a stalk, close to prey, barely moving at all. What midnight on the savanna is not, in terms of lion behavior, is a period of constant activity. The image of lions as continuously on the prowl from dusk to dawn is not accurate. The truth is more intermittent. They move, they pause, they wait, they move again. The rest periods during the night are different from the deep afternoon sleep, lighter, more responsive, but they are still rest. The body needs recovery. The muscles need glucose replenishment. Even at night, even in their most active window, lions spend a substantial portion of time not actively doing anything that would read as hunting or hunting preparation. This is part of what makes lions sustainable as a population within an ecosystem. They are not extracting maximum possible prey from the environment on every possible occasion. They are not running every night, hunting every night, making kills every single night. Most individual lions make a kill roughly once every 3 to 5 days, depending on circumstances, prey availability, and whether they have access to kills made by other pride members. Cubs and younger animals depend on adults' kills for much of their nutrition. The ecosystem has space for lions because lions, for all their efficiency during the times they do hunt, are not running at full capacity all the time. They are calibrated to something more sustainable. The early hours of the morning, the period between roughly 2 and 5 a.m., are often described in the ecological literature as a period of peak lion hunting activity, particularly for coordinated hunts. This is somewhat variable by region, season, prey availability, and individual pride behavior. But there is something consistent about this late-night window that makes it productive for predators. By this point, prey animals that were alert and vigilant in the early evening have been awake for many hours. The constant neurological cost of maintained alertness, keeping sensory systems active, staying ready to respond to threat, is metabolically expensive and cannot be maintained indefinitely at the same pitch. There is something that functions like fatigue in vigilance, a gradual reduction in the acuity of threat detection that comes with extended wakefulness. Simultaneously, the lions that have been resting through parts of the night are at their freshest in terms of muscular energy. They have not spent the late afternoon and evening burning glucose on activity. They have been conserving. Whatever chase they end up making will be made on rested muscles and full energy reserves. This asymmetry, prey at a low point of vigilance, predators at a relative high point of energy, is one of the factors that contributes to the success rate of late-night and early morning hunts compared to early evening attempts. It is not the only factor, and it does not operate the same way in all circumstances, but it is real, and it is part of why the temporal pattern of lion hunting activity looks the way it does. There is something almost elegant in this from a biological perspective. The predator and prey are not simply competing in a direct confrontation. They are competing across time, each calibrated to different parts of the daily cycle, each with their peak efficiency at different hours, and the interaction between them shaped by those temporal rhythms as much as by any direct test of speed or strength. Not every hunt results in a chase. Not every orientation toward prey leads to a stalk. Not every stalk leads to a sprint. This might seem obvious, but it is worth dwelling on because it shapes what a night in a lion's life actually looks like in terms of behavioral content. A significant proportion of the time spent in what could be called hunting mode, the loose exploratory movement through areas where prey are present, results in no immediate hunting action. The lions smell prey, or see them at a distance, or hear them, and then do nothing. Distance is too great. The wind is wrong. The prey are alert and facing toward the lions. The terrain between the lion and the prey offers no cover. There are too many prey animals together for a clean selection of a vulnerable individual. Lions are not in a constant state of frustrated, thwarted ambition on these occasions. They are not straining against some internal urgency to charge. They simply continue doing what they were doing, moving, observing, resting, gathering information. The decision not to attempt a hunt on any given opportunity is as much a part of their behavioral repertoire as the decision to attempt one. And the ability to leave an opportunity alone, to not commit energy to a chase that is unlikely to succeed, is itself a kind of adaptation. It preserves resources for better opportunities. This is worth mentioning explicitly because it affects how you read lion behavior in the field and how you think about what they are doing at any given moment. A lion, that is, sitting still and looking at a herd of zebras 400 meters away is not necessarily waiting to hunt. It may be simply observing. It may be aware of the herd, but have already assessed that no approach is currently viable. It may be uninterested in hunting at that moment, full from a recent meal, or simply not in a behavioral state that connects to hunting. Lions are not automatons running a hunting program continuously. The idea of animals as being primarily defined by their predator or prey role sometimes obscures how much time those animals spend not being predators or prey. A lion that is sleeping, or playing with a companion, or drinking water, or grooming itself is just an animal doing animal things. The ecological role is real and important, but it does not occupy every moment. There is a particular sound that the savanna makes in the deepest part of the night that is not produced by any animal, or rather, that is produced by the collective of all the small things that move. In darkness. It is a low, continuous white noise of grass moving in a slight wind, of insects at the minimum of their chorus, of the settling and expansion of soil and rock as they cool. It is the sound of the savanna at rest. Against this sound, certain things stand out sharply. The bark of a zebra, a distinctive, almost dog-like sound that zebras produce specifically as an alarm call, carries a long way in the quiet night air. The snort of a wildebeest, the chattering of a disturbed guinea fowl. Any of these sounds, produced in a particular context, can ripple outward through the landscape and change the behavior of animals that are far from the original source. Lions hear these sounds. They register them and process them, not consciously, but in the rapid, below-awareness way that acoustic information moves through a brain. A zebra bark in a specific direction followed by the sound of movement in the same direction, tells a listening lion something about where prey is and what it is doing. If the sounds are moving away, there may be no useful hunting opportunity in that direction. If the sounds stop quickly and the movement ceases, it may mean the alarm was for something else, another predator, perhaps, or a false alarm. The night is full of this kind of information, and lions are always at some level processing it. Not urgently, not anxiously, with the calm attentiveness of an animal that belongs there, that fits the environment as precisely as the environment fits them. We will stay with this night a little longer in the next part. There is more to follow, and we are in no hurry to reach it. Before we close this first part of tonight's exploration, let's sit for a moment in one particular image. Not a dramatic one, not a moment of action, but something quieter. It is roughly 10 in the evening. The last traces of dusk are long gone. The sky is deep and clear and full of stars. Somewhere to the south, barely audible, is the distant calling of a spotted hyena. A rising, whooping call that is carrying across kilometers of flat ground before reaching this place. The grass around us is silver-grey in the starlight. The trees are black shapes against the sky. And ahead, perhaps 60 meters, 3 lionesses are lying in the grass. They are not sleeping. They are not particularly alert. They are simply present. Heads raised slightly, ears occasionally orienting towards sounds that we cannot identify from our position. Their bodies are relaxed. Their breathing is slow and even. They are not planning. They are not worrying. They are not anticipating anything specific. They are in the middle of a night that contains everything it needs to contain. The sounds, the smells, the gradually cooling air, the faint movement of the grass, the presence of other lions in the pride nearby, the distant information carried by that hyena call. They are simply lions at night, and there is nothing more and nothing less than that. We left the night at a quiet moment. 3 lionesses in silver grass, not sleeping, not hunting, simply present. Let's stay close to that image for a while longer before we move deeper into what the night means for them, what it gives them, what it asks of them, and what kind of animals they become in the dark. There is a tendency, when we talk about apex predators, to reach for the language of dominance, of power, of control. These words are not wrong exactly, but they carry connotations that do not quite fit the actual texture of how lions live. Dominance, as it is commonly imagined, implies something active, something maintained through continuous effort, through displays and assertions, and the constant projection of force. The reality of how lions operate, particularly at night, is almost the opposite of this. Their position in the savanna ecosystem is maintained largely through economy, through the precise application of effort at the right moment, and the careful conservation of energy at every other moment. This is what we are going to explore in this part. Not the dramatic version of lion power, but the quiet version, the functional version, the version that actually explains how they have persisted in this environment for millions of years, coexisting with prey species that outnumber them enormously, sharing the landscape with competitors like hyenas and wild dogs and leopards, surviving drought and disease and the unpredictability of seasonal rainfall, and doing all of this without urgency, without haste. Because that is perhaps the most consistent feature of lion behavior if you watch long enough. They are not in a hurry about almost anything. Let's continue with the eye, because we left that subject before finishing it. We discussed the tapetum lucidum, the rod density, the dilating pupil. These are the structural features of lion vision that make the dark more navigable for them. But there is another dimension to how vision works in low-light conditions that is worth understanding, because it shapes the entire experience of moving through darkness. In very low light, all mammalian visual systems, including the lions, experience a shift in what they can perceive with greatest clarity. Under bright daylight conditions, the center of the visual field tends to offer the highest resolution, because the fovea, a small central area of the retina that is densely packed with cones, is responsible for detailed central vision. But in low light, when cones are not functioning well and rods carry most of the processing, the distribution of highest sensitivity shifts. The fovea itself contains very few rods, so in the dark, looking directly at something can actually produce a less clear image than looking slightly to the side of it, a technique called averted vision, which astronomers learn deliberately and which predators may use naturally without any conscious technique. This means that the way a lion's gaze moves across the landscape at night is not necessarily the same as how it moves during the day. The scanning behavior, the way attention is distributed across the visual field, may be somewhat different. Movement, particularly, is detected peripherally. Rods are more sensitive to motion than to fine static detail. So, a prey animal that freezes and holds still when a lion is nearby is doing something functionally intelligent from a sensory processing perspective. A frozen animal against a static background is much harder for any visual system to register than a moving one. This creates a kind of arms race dynamic. Prey species that freeze effectively, holding still for long periods when a predator is close, survive more often than those that panic and flee at the first sign of danger. Over evolutionary time, the individuals with better freeze responses, longer patience for stillness, more accurate assessment of whether a predator has detected them, these individuals leave more descendants. The behavior becomes more common in the population. At the same time, predators that are better at detecting still animals through smell, through the patience to wait out a freeze response, also do better. Both sides are being shaped by the interaction. Lions, watching for prey in the dark, are therefore not simply scanning for large shapes. They are detecting motion. They are reading the acoustic landscape for information. They are processing scent. They are integrating multiple streams of sensory information simultaneously in a way that produces a composite picture of what is nearby, where it is, and what it is doing. This integration happens continuously and mostly below the level of anything we would call conscious processing. It is fast, it is automatic, and it is calibrated to the specific signals that matter in the lion's environment. Group behavior in lions at night operates through mechanisms that are more implicit than explicit. And this is worth taking some time with because it is one of the more interesting aspects of how prides function. When researchers study coordinated hunts in lions, one of the consistent findings is that the coordination does not appear to require any obvious signal giving. There is no identifiable call or gesture that functions as a go signal. There is no visible leader that others watch and follow. What happens instead looks more like synchronized response to shared stimuli. All the animals in a group responding to the same environmental trigger in ways that happen to produce coordinated behavior, because they are all calibrated to respond similarly in similar situations. This might sound like it reduces coordination to coincidence, but that is not the right reading. The calibration is real. The fact that multiple animals have developed similar behavioral responses to the same class of stimuli means that when one animal begins to move in a particular way, others can predict what it is responding to and adjust their own behavior accordingly. They are not following a leader. They are doing independent but convergent assessments of the same situation and arriving at compatible decisions. This distinction matters because it points to something interesting about how intelligence works in social animals. We tend to think of coordination as requiring communication. Someone transmits information, someone else receives it and changes their behavior. But much coordination in the animal world works through shared context and shared behavioral tendencies, not through signal and response. The outcome can look very similar from the outside. In practice, what this looks like in a hunting pride is something like this. A group of females has been moving slowly through an area for 30 or 40 minutes. They have detected, through various sensory channels, that prey is somewhere ahead. Let's say a small group of wildebeest, resting, roughly 200 meters away. The lions have not rushed. They have continued moving in a generally forward direction, but obliquely, not directly toward the prey. The progress has been slow enough that a casual observer might not recognize it as an approach. At some point, the leading edge of the group, whatever animals happen to be positioned at the front, comes within a distance where the calculation shifts. The approach distance is close enough, the wind is favorable, the prey have not shown alarm. One animal lowers herself slightly and begins moving in a way that is qualitatively different from walking. Lower, slower, more deliberate, each foot placed more carefully. Without any apparent signal, a second animal does the same thing. Then a third. They are all responding to the same reality. The hunt is now close enough to enter its next phase. Each of them can feel that from the situation directly. They do not need to look at each other to know. Energy conservation in lions is not simply about resting between hunts. It is woven into the texture of how they move during active periods, how they approach prey, how they structure the hunt itself. The chase portion of a lion hunt, the actual high-speed pursuit, is notably short. In documented hunts, the sprint phase typically lasts somewhere between 100 and 300 meters, and often less. Lions do not have the sustained running ability of animals like wild dogs or cheetahs. A wild dog can run at moderate speeds for extraordinary distances. They are pursuit predators in a very different style than lions, capable of running prey to exhaustion over several kilometers. A cheetah has the highest top speed of any land animal, but tires quickly and must conclude a chase within a few hundred meters or abandon it. Lions sit in a different position. Their top speed, roughly 50 to 60 kilometers per hour in short bursts, is respectable, and their acceleration is significant. But their sustainable running speed over longer distances is not exceptional. They overheat quickly during intense exertion. A lion that runs hard for more than 200 to 300 meters is already beginning to generate body heat that needs to be managed. And in the darkness and relative cool of the night, this is better than it would be during the day, but it is still a constraint. This is why the stalk is so important. The stalk is the part of the hunt that substitutes patience for speed. By getting close enough before the chase begins, by covering the final 50 or 100 meters while the prey is unaware, the lion converts a potential 400-meter chase into a 100-meter chase. The energetic difference between these is enormous, and the probability of success is much higher over a shorter distance. The investment in the stalk, therefore, is not simply caution. It is energy efficiency. Every meter gained in the slow, careful approach is a meter not required at full sprint. Every minute spent waiting for wind conditions to improve is a minute that might mean the difference between a chase that can be completed and one that cannot. This is where patience and power intersect in a way that is easy to miss if you are focused on the visible drama. The quiet waiting, the slow movement, the long intervals of apparent inactivity, these are not the absence of hunting behavior. They are the core of it. They are what makes the final sprint viable when it comes. There is a particular kind of stillness that a lion achieves in the final stages of a stalk that is worth trying to describe, because it is quite different from the relaxed rest of midday sleep or the casual resting of the early night. In the final 30 or 40 meters of an approach, a lion moving in on prey enters what can only be described as a state of complete physical commitment to not moving, alternating with movement so slow it barely registers. Foot placement is deliberate to the point of seeming studied. Each paw is set down on a surface that has been, in some sense, selected. Not on a dry stick, not on loose gravel, not on a surface that will shift and produce sound. The belly may be close to the ground. The head is held forward and level, the eyes fixed. The body is poised between the stillness of waiting and the explosive release of the sprint. Breathing is managed. Metabolically, the lion still needs oxygen. It cannot simply stop breathing, but the rate and depth change. Exhaled breath carries sound and, more relevantly, carries scent. In wind conditions, where some of that exhaled scent might drift toward the prey, the timing of exhalation could matter. Whether lions actively manage breathing during stalks in a way that reduces scent exposure is not something that has been well studied, but it is not an implausible consideration. The ears are forward. Whatever is happening in the prey group, movement, sound, shifts in alert status, is being continuously registered. If a prey animal looks directly at the lion's position, the lion will generally freeze completely and hold that freeze for as long as necessary, seconds, or if needed, minutes. The assessment being made in those moments is, has the prey animal identified me as a lion, as a threat, or is it simply looking in this direction because of some other stimulus? The lion's response to being looked at during a stalk is one of the more nuanced behaviors in the sequence. It is not flight, it is not charge, it is stillness, and it is maintained with a precision that most other animals cannot match. There is an interesting side note here about how prey animals assess information about predators. Research with various ungulate species has found that prey animals make distinctions between a predator that is in a non-hunting posture versus one in a hunting posture. A lion walking upright in a relaxed way does not necessarily trigger the same alarm response as a lion crouching low and moving slowly and directly. Prey animals are not simply reacting to the presence of a lion. They are, in some sense, reading the lion's behavior and assessing risk accordingly. This means that a lion maintaining an upright, relaxed posture while moving toward prey is sometimes able to approach more closely than a lion in an obvious stalk posture, because the prey's risk assessment returns a lower threat level. Whether lions exploit this in any deliberate way, whether the relaxed approach is ever a tactical choice, is not clearly established. What is clear is that the interaction between predator behavior and prey assessment is more complex than a simple trigger-response dynamic. One of the most consistently documented features of lion social behavior during hunts is the division, roughly speaking, between animals that take positions from which they will attempt the actual killing strike, and animals that take positions that function to drive prey toward those animals. This is sometimes described in the literature as a distinction between centers and wings. Animals positioned at the center of an anticipated prey movement that will be the ones making contact, and animals positioned at the flanks that drive prey toward the center. Studies in East Africa, particularly in the Serengeti, have documented this pattern repeatedly, though the exact configuration varies considerably. Some hunts involve this kind of spatial differentiation clearly. Others look much less structured. The degree to which any particular hunt involves intentional positioning by individual lions, as opposed to emergent arrangement, remains genuinely debated. What is interesting about the center wing arrangement, when it does occur, is that it requires different behaviors from different animals. The wing animals need to move, to show themselves, to press the prey in a direction. The center animals need to stay still, to remain hidden, to wait. An animal on the wing is doing something almost opposite to an animal at the center. It is being visible and active rather than invisible and patient. And yet both roles serve the same outcome. This behavioral flexibility, the ability of the same animal in different hunts to occupy either role, is not trivial. It means that individual lions have behavioral repertoires that include both the active drive behavior and the patient wait behavior, and they deploy them based on circumstances and possibly based on what other pride members are doing. An animal that moves to a wing position and begins pressing prey is, in some sense, relying on another animal having taken a center position. The two behaviors only make sense in relation to each other. Whether this constitutes true cooperative planning, whether lions have something like a mental representation of the hunt's structure and their own role within it, is one of those genuinely open questions in animal cognition research. It is a harder question than it might appear. Demonstrating that behavior looks coordinated is different from demonstrating that it is the product of shared intentional planning. The behavioral ecology perspective would suggest that much of what looks like coordination can be explained by individual optimization given individual information. The animal cognition perspective would ask whether that explanation fully accounts for everything we see. Both perspectives have merit, and neither has definitively won the argument. Let's move away from hunting for a moment and talk about what the rest of the night looks like. The parts that have nothing to do with prey detection and approach and chase. Because a significant portion of any lion's night is occupied by things that are not hunting, by social interaction, by maintenance behavior, by the kind of low-key activities that are easy to overlook, but which are actually central to the life of the pride. Grooming is one of these. Lions groom each other, a behavior called allo-grooming, with some regularity, and it is not simply a matter of hygiene. It is a social behavior that functions to maintain bonds, to signal and reinforce relationships, to reduce tension between individuals. Two adult females grooming each other are doing something that has long-term significance for the functioning of the pride. The quality of cooperation during a hunt, whether females coordinate well, whether they tolerate each other's proximity during feeding, is affected by the state of relationships between individuals. Allo-grooming is one of the behaviors that maintains those relationships. It happens at night. Not exclusively, but nights provide long, uninterrupted periods during which the subtle social maintenance of the pride can occur. After a hunt, after feeding, when energy has been replenished and the acute demands of the evening are over, lions that are still awake may rest close to each other, may groom, may engage in play. The play of adult lions is quieter and less frequent than the play of cubs, but it is not absent. Particularly among younger adults, animals that have recently reached adulthood and are still establishing their positions in the pride's social structure. Play behavior at night is not uncommon. Cubs, for their part, are most active during the cooler night hours in the same way that adults are. Very young cubs stay close to their mothers and to the creche structure that nursing lionesses form when multiple females in the pride are raising young simultaneously. But older cubs, those past roughly 6 to 8 months, begin to follow the adults on their nighttime movements, learning by observation and proximity what the adults do. This learning period is long. Lions do not become effective hunters quickly. The full development of hunting competence takes years. Young lions contribute meaningfully to hunts from around 2 years of age, but they do not become independently proficient hunters until they are several years older. The nights of their development are spent watching, following, practicing. Mock stalks on grass clumps. Play charges at siblings. Observation of the adult's approach behavior from a position that is close enough to see, but far enough to not disrupt the stalk. Let's spend some time on a dimension of lion night behavior that is less about hunting and more about space, about territory, about the way lions relate to the landscape they occupy. A pride's territory, the area it uses regularly and defends against other lions, can range enormously in size. In prey-rich environments like the Serengeti, territories might be as small as 20 square kilometers. In more arid environments with sparser prey, like parts of the Kalahari, territories can exceed 2,000 square kilometers. The territory is not used uniformly. There are core areas that are visited more frequently and peripheral areas that are covered less often but are still within the claimed range. At night, territorial behavior takes a specific form. Scent marking, the deposition of urine, feces, secretions from glands at specific locations, is an ongoing project. Males are the primary scent markers, but females also mark, particularly within the core of the territory. These marks fade over time. The chemical components that carry the signal degrade, and so maintaining them requires regular revisiting of marking sites and remarking. The pattern of marking sites across a territory creates a kind of distributed message system. Other lions that move through an area can detect these marks and receive information. The sex of the marker, potentially some assessment of when the mark was deposited, possibly individual identity. Whether lions can extract detailed information from scent marks, whether they can tell one individual from another with any precision, or assess the freshness of a mark accurately, is not fully resolved by the research, but the marks are clearly functional. Lions respond differently to the presence of marks from known pride members versus unfamiliar scents. Night patrols along territorial boundaries are a real behavior in lion biology. Males particularly engage in them, but females also move along familiar routes through their territory with a regularity that serves a monitoring function. These patrols are not anxious or defensive in their character. They do not look like the agitated pacing of an animal under threat. They look like deliberate, purposeful movement through a known space. The stops along the way, to sniff, to mark, to listen, are brief and efficient. Information is gathered and deposited with a minimum of fuss. The lion at night moving along a territorial boundary is not asserting anything to a visible audience. There may be no other lions within hearing range. But the behavior makes sense in the context of a long-term distributed process, one in which the cumulative effect of regular marking and patrol is the maintenance of a spatial claim that has real consequences for other lions. Behavior. A well-maintained territory, with fresh marks and evidence of regular resident activity, is one that other lions are less likely to intrude upon. The effort invested in each individual patrol and marking event pays off, not immediately but over time, in reduced confrontation. There is something worth saying about the relationship between silence and information in the lion's nighttime world. We tend to think of sensory information as coming from signals, sounds, scents, sights, and these are certainly important. But for animals operating in a complex environment full of potential threats and opportunities, the absence of expected signals can be just as informative as the signals themselves. Silence where there was sound. A bird that was calling and then stopped. the termination of an insect chorus in a specific area. These are not the absence of information. They are a specific kind of information. They tell an attentive animal that something has changed, that some other animal in the vicinity has been disturbed or alarmed, that the usual background texture of the night has been interrupted. Lions respond to this kind of negative information. A pride that is moving through an area and encounters a zone of unusual quiet, where birds have fallen silent, where the small movements of prey animals have ceased, is receiving a signal that something has altered. It might mean another predator is nearby. It might mean the prey have detected the lions and frozen. It might mean something moved through the area minutes earlier, and the normal activity has not yet resumed. Processing this kind of information requires a baseline knowledge of what is normal in an environment. You have to know what the night sounds like when nothing unusual is happening in order to notice when it sounds different. This is the kind of knowledge that accumulates over time, over years of moving through the same general area, learning its rhythms and its typical sounds and the specific quality of its silences. Adult lions that have lived in the same territory for several years have this kind of knowledge. They know the routes that prey follow between water and grazing. They know the areas where certain species aggregate at certain times of year. They know the locations of the neighboring prides' marking routes and have a rough sense of when those routes are typically used. They know their own territory in a way that is far more detailed and sophisticated than anything we can fully reconstruct from the outside. This local knowledge is one of the underappreciated advantages of territorial animals. A lion living in a familiar territory is not simply physically powerful, it is informationally rich. It has a context for everything it perceives that makes each perception more meaningful. A sound from the direction of a specific drainage channel means one thing given what the lion knows is typically found there. The same sound from an open plain means something different. The interpretation is not simply about the raw sensory data. It is about how that data fits into a known map of place and time and habit. Let's return to the question of dominance and what it actually looks like in practice at night. The word gets applied to lions regularly and in various different senses. There is the interspecific sense, lions as apex predators, dominant over other species in their ecosystem. There is the intraspecific sense, hierarchies within prides and coalitions, individuals whose access to food and mates reflects their social position. And there is the broader ecological sense, lion populations as a structuring force in savanna ecosystems, affecting the behavior and distribution of prey species. All three of these senses are real, but none of them looks like what we might picture when we hear the word dominance. None of them involves a lion actively asserting its position on a continuous basis. None of them requires the constant projection of force. Interspecific dominance, at night, mostly manifests as the absence of challenge. Lions at a carcass are not typically driven off by hyenas. A coalition of 2 or 3 adult males will generally hold a kill against any number of hyenas that do not severely outnumber them, and against most other predators they might encounter. But this is not because lions are fighting constantly. It is because most animals in the savanna have a kind of functional assessment of what a lion is, and they do not challenge it without very specific circumstances. The dominance is maintained by reputation as much as by action. Hyenas do challenge lions, and these interactions can be intense. A large hyena clan can occasionally drive a lone lion off a kill, and mobbing of individual lions by groups of hyenas is documented. But the typical interaction is more measured. Hyenas approaching a lion-held carcass test the situation, approaching, retreating, calling, approaching again. Lions may respond with threat displays, A direct stare, a low growl, a short rush, and the hyenas adjust their behavior based on these signals. The outcome is usually determined more by numbers and confidence than by direct physical contest. Within the pride, social hierarchies are real but subtle. There are lions that access food first and lions that wait. There are lions whose spatial position during rest, whether they are at the comfortable center of a resting group or at its edge, reflects something about their standing. But these hierarchies are not enforced by constant visible aggression. They are maintained by a history of interactions, by accumulated experience of who defers to whom and in what circumstances, by a kind of social knowledge that all the animals in the group carry. The dominant female in a pride does not spend her nights asserting her dominance. She simply occupies her position. Others give way without needing to be reminded. The hierarchy runs on precedent and familiarity, not on continuous enforcement. There is a shift that happens in lion behavior somewhere in the hours before dawn. The biological pre-dawn period, roughly 4 to 6 a.m., depending on season and latitude, that is distinct from both the deep night behavior and what will follow with daylight. In this window, hunting activity often either concludes or intensifies. If a pride has been moving and watching and testing without making a kill, there is sometimes a quality of increased purposefulness in the pre-dawn hours, as though the body registers that the optimal window is ending, and something in the behavioral programming pushes toward commitment. Hunts that occur in the last hour before first light are not uncommon, and the success rate of these pre-dawn hunts may be comparable to the earlier night hours. This is also the time when the savanna's acoustic environment begins to change again. Not yet toward the bird chorus of morning. That comes with the actual light, typically starting 20 to 40 minutes before sunrise, but in the behavior of night-active animals. Some species that are active through the night begin to reduce their activity. Others, ones that use the transitional period between dark and light, become more active. Male lions sometimes roar in this pre-dawn period with particular frequency and intensity. This is one of the peak times for roaring in the daily cycle. The roars carry across the cooling air with great clarity, and they serve their territorial and social function at a moment when other lion activity in the landscape is also high. When males and females of other prides are themselves active and likely to hear and respond. The response to a roar heard at a distance is calibrated. A pride that hears an unfamiliar roar in the direction of its territory's boundary is receiving specific information. There is an unknown lion or coalition at that location. The response might be to move toward the sound, a counter-display of presence and willingness to engage, or to move away, or to remain and assess further. Which response is appropriate depends on the size and composition of the responding group, the size and apparent composition of the group producing the roar, the specific location relative to the core of the territory, and the history of interactions in that area. Research on lion roaring responses has found that prides can make discriminating assessments based on the number of voices they hear roaring together. A group of lions will approach and confront another group that sounds equal in size to themselves. They will be more cautious or avoid altogether a group that sounds larger. They will move toward and pursue a single intruder with considerable confidence. This assessment happens rapidly, in the dark, based on sound alone. It is not simple. It requires the ability to estimate something like group size from acoustic information, and to compare that estimate to self-perceived group strength. This is a reasonably sophisticated computation, and it happens routinely, in the dark, multiple times in a season, for any active pride. There is something to be said here about what strength means in the context of a species that operates this way. We tend to measure animal strength in physical terms: muscle mass, bite force, the ability to take down large prey, the capacity to win direct confrontations. And lions score well on all of these measures. An adult lion's bite force is substantial. Its forelimb strength is sufficient to bring down prey many times its own weight. Its capacity for violence in direct confrontation, when it comes to that, is very real. But what sustains a lion over the course of its life? What makes it possible for a lion to live for 10 to 14 years in the wild, to raise offspring, to maintain a territory, to hunt successfully through droughts and lean seasons and competition with other predators, is not primarily the capacity for violence. It is the capacity for appropriate restraint, for the precise application of effort, for knowing when to move and when to wait, for reading the environment accurately enough to act when action is genuinely useful. A lion that charges every potential prey item, regardless of circumstances, would exhaust itself quickly and hunt with low success rates. A male lion that engaged in physical confrontation with every other male it encountered would accumulate injuries rapidly and compromise its long-term fitness. A pride that failed to cooperate, whose members competed directly for food rather than coordinating their activity, would have lower overall hunting success than one where the social relationships were functional. The strength of a lion, understood properly, is the whole system. The sensory capacity, the social organization, the energy management, the patience, the timing. The muscle and the teeth are components of that system, but they are the last resort, not the primary mechanism. Cooperation rather than aggression. This is one of the consistent themes in the behavioral ecology of lions, and it deserves some time before we move on. It might seem obvious that animals living in a social group would cooperate rather than fight constantly. Continuous internal conflict would be inefficient and damaging for all involved. But the degree to which cooperation is the default mode, the degree to which lions in a functioning pride genuinely operate as a collective rather than as competing individuals using each other for advantage, is more substantial than a simple efficiency argument would predict. Females in a pride nurse each other's cubs. This is not universal and not unlimited. There are situations where a female will refuse to nurse cubs that are not her own. But it is common enough that it has been documented repeatedly, and it does contribute to cub survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense, given that pride females are related. A female that nurses her sister's cubs is contributing to the survival of animals that share a significant proportion of her own genes. The cooperation is self-interested in a genetic sense, but it looks and functions like cooperation in a behavioral sense. Females coordinate cub defense against external threats, including threats from infanticidal males. When new males take over a pride and attempt to kill existing cubs, which they do because it causes the nursing females to come into estrus more quickly, giving the new males a reproductive opportunity, the females resist collectively. Multiple females will confront and chase the males, and while they rarely win a direct physical confrontation with adult males, their collective presence can be effective in protecting cubs in specific situations. The coordination of this defense is real. During feeding at a kill, lions that belong to the same pride do compete for access. Feeding is not a polite, orderly process. But this competition is bounded. It does not typically escalate to serious injury between pride members. There are priority relationships that are respected, and once an animal has eaten sufficient meat, it tends to move away and rest, rather than continuing to defend food access against others. The competition is real, but contained. The social fabric of the pride is maintained through all of this, through the nursing and the cub defense and the managed competition at kills. And it shows up most clearly at night, when the pride's collective activity is at its peak. The relationships between individuals determine who hunts with whom, who takes which position, who follows whose initial movement. None of this is random. None of it starts fresh each night. It is the product of a long, ongoing social history that plays out in the darkness with a naturalness that makes it easy to miss. There is a particular kind of quiet that descends over a pride that has made a kill and fed, and is now in the post-feeding resting period. It is different from other kinds of lion quiet. The deep afternoon sleep has a certain quality, complete, committed, bodies loose and heavy. The alert rest of early night has its own quality, lighter, more responsive, that slight readiness that comes with a body in its active phase. The post-kill quiet is something different again. It is the specific stillness of animals that are physiologically content. Stomachs full, energy replenished, immediate needs met. Lions can eat extraordinary amounts in a single feeding. An adult lioness may consume 15 to 20 kilograms of meat in one session. An adult male can eat more. Up to 30 kilograms has been recorded. This is not the steady intake of a continuous feeder. It is the gorging of an animal whose biology is adapted to intermittent abundance. The digestive system and the liver are prepared for large inputs, followed by periods of no intake at all. This is the feast and fast pattern that characterizes large predators in environments where prey is not uniformly available. After such a feeding, the lions are slow and clearly weighted with what they have eaten. They move to a resting area, sometimes a short distance from the carcass, which may continue to be worked on by other lions, or will soon attract scavengers. And they arrange themselves in the characteristic loose cluster of a resting pride. The cubs, if present, may be more active than the adults, playing near the resting adults, receiving the occasional gentle cuff from an adult who does not want to be climbed on. The sounds at this time are minimal. There might be the rumble of digestive activity, barely audible, the slow breathing of sleeping adults. Occasionally, the brief vocalization of a cub. And then, from somewhere across the dark savanna, the roar of a distant lion, answered after a moment by the roar of a pride male, and then silence again. The question of what it means to rule landscape in any meaningful biological sense is one worth sitting with for a moment as we approach the end of this part. Lions are described as apex predators, as keystone species, as rulers of the savanna. These descriptions are not inaccurate, but they can be misleading if they suggest that rulership is something actively exercised, continuously performed, constantly maintained. What lions actually do is exist in a particular position within an ecological network. They are the top of a food web in their range, meaning that nothing regularly preys on them in their adult form. They regulate prey populations through predation, not in a neat, precisely controlled way, but in a statistical sense where their presence and activity puts a ceiling on how fast certain prey populations can grow. They affect the behavior of prey species through their mere presence, the landscape of fear that predator ecologists describe, where prey modify their movements and habitat use in response to predator distribution, with cascading effects on vegetation and other species. All of this is real, but none of it involves lions consciously managing anything. None of it requires them to do anything other than be what they are, to live, hunt, rest, reproduce, and die in the context of an ecosystem that has been shaped by their presence over geological time. The rule, such as it is exercised through existence rather than through action. The savanna is different because lions are in it. The prey behave differently than they would if lions were absent. The vegetation is different. The hydrology of specific areas may be different because of how grazing patterns are structured partly by predator pressure. All of this flows from the basic fact of lions existing in this ecosystem, not from any specific behavior they perform. And most of what they do, on most nights, is nothing particularly dramatic. They walk, they rest, they groom, they watch, they raise young, they maintain relationships with each other. They move through a landscape they know well, doing the routine things that their biology and their social structure require. The power is there. The capability is real, but it sits mostly quiet, mostly still, mostly waiting for the moments when it is actually needed. And on this warm night, in this savanna that is now deep into its dark hours, the pride rests. The cubs are asleep. The females who hunted earlier have fed and are lying heavily on their sides rising and falling in slow breath. One male has roared twice in the last hour and is now also resting, his mane spread against the cool grass, his eyes open but unfocused. The stars have moved. The temperature has dropped another degree or two. Somewhere distant, a nightjar calls twice and stops. The night is still more than halfway present. Everything that is going to happen in it has not yet happened. The night at this hour belongs to no single thing. That is perhaps the most honest way to begin this final part. We have spent time with the lions, with their eyes, their patience, their social fabric, their quiet authority. But the savanna at night is not a stage built for lions alone. It is a shared space, inhabited simultaneously by many kinds of animals, each one operating within its own sensory world, each one carrying its own version of the night. To understand what the dark hours really are, what they mean ecologically, what they ask of every animal present, you have to step back from the predator's perspective and try to hold the whole picture at once. Not the view from the lion's position in the grass, not the dramatic moment of the sprint, but the full, complex, interwoven reality of a savanna night, in which every species is responding to every other species, in which the behavior of one animal shapes the behavior of dozens of others, in which the line between hunter and hunted is less a fixed boundary and more a shifting relationship that depends entirely on circumstance. That is what we are going to explore here. The other side of the night, the praise world, the acoustic landscape, the web of detection and evasion that runs beneath everything, invisible but constant. And then, at the end, something about what it means that none of this, none of the night's complexity, none of its balance, requires any of it to be planned or organized or intended. It simply runs, night after night, season after season, year after year. When we talk about prey animals at night, the first thing to understand is that the category prey is not a fixed identity. It is a relationship. A zebra is prey in relation to a lion, yes, but that same zebra is not prey in relation to a wildebeest standing next to it. And the interaction between those two species, the zebra and the wildebeest grazing or resting in proximity, is itself ecologically significant, not as predator and prey, but as a cooperative partnership of a particular kind. Mixed species groups on the savanna are common and functional. Zebra and wildebeest in particular are frequently found together, and their association is not random. The two species have different sensory strengths. Zebra have excellent vision and are good at detecting movement at distance. Wildebeest have particularly acute hearing and a strong sense of smell. The combined sensory coverage of a mixed group is better than either species would have alone. A predator approaching a mixed herd is facing a more comprehensive detection system than it would face with a single species group. This kind of mutualism, where two species benefit from association without any formal cooperation, simply by being in proximity and responding to the same threats, runs throughout the savanna. It is not deliberate. No zebra decided to associate with wildebeest because it reasoned through the sensory complementarity. But animals that happened to associate benefited, and that benefit was expressed in survival and reproduction over many generations, until the tendency toward mixed association became part of the behavioral norm. At night, this dynamic intensifies. The darkness does not create equal disadvantage for all species simultaneously. Different animals have different degrees of night vision, different sensory hierarchies, different behavioral adjustments. The specific configuration of a mixed herd at night, which species are positioned where, which individuals are alert at any given moment, is always shifting, always responding to the flow of information from the environment. The sense of hearing in prey animals on the savanna is worth examining specifically, because it is, in many ways, the primary sensory channel at night. The ears of horses and zebra, donkeys, antelope, and other ungulates are anatomically distinct from human ears in ways that are directly relevant to night detection. They are large relative to body size. They can rotate independently. Each ear can point in a different direction, effectively giving the animal directional coverage across a wide arc without any movement of the head. The range of frequencies detectable by many prey ungulates extends somewhat beyond the human range, though the differences are not as dramatic as they are for some other mammals. What matters most for predator detection is not the absolute frequency range, or even the absolute sensitivity. It is the animal's ability to localize sound in three-dimensional space, to determine where a sound is coming from, and to compare what it hears against what it expects to hear. An impala standing in the dark is continuously processing the acoustic environment, building and updating a model of what is present and where. When that model is disrupted, when a sound occurs that does not fit the expected background pattern, the response is immediate and not particularly voluntary. The head snaps up, the ears orient. The body is already in the first microseconds of a preparation for flight. This response is mediated by a neural circuit that bypasses slower, deliberate processing. The signal goes from the cochlea to specific subcortical areas of the brain, the medial geniculate nucleus, the superior colliculus, that can initiate a startle response before any conscious assessment has occurred. The animal is already moving, or already in a heightened state of readiness, before it has, in any meaningful sense, decided to respond. This speed is the product of selection on a timescale where the difference between a 200 millisecond response and a 400 millisecond response is the difference between escaping a predator's first lunge and being caught by it. Lions, stalking in the dark, are always working against this system. They are attempting to produce no sound that fits the pattern of a predator approach. They are trying to exist, for the duration of the stalk, beneath the threshold of detection, beneath the level of acoustic disturbance that would trigger that involuntary response. Every paw placed carefully, every pause to let a gust of wind mask a sound that could not be entirely avoided. Every moment of complete stillness when a prey head raises. All of this is an effort to remain below the threshold. The prey's hearing system is running continuously and has no off switch. The lion's stalk is an ongoing negotiation with that system's sensitivity. Smell is even harder to manage than sound, from a predator's perspective, and it plays a large role in the nighttime ecology of the savanna. The olfactory capabilities of most ungulates are substantial. The nasal architecture of a wildebeest, a zebra, an impala, the turbinate bones, the olfactory epithelium, the dense receptor surface, is considerably more developed than in humans. The number of functional olfactory receptor genes in these species is higher. The brain area devoted to processing olfactory information is proportionally larger. What this means in practical terms is that a downwind prey animal can detect a lion at considerable distance, potentially 300 to 500 meters or more under favorable conditions, depending on wind speed and consistency, the concentration of scent molecules, and the specific physiology involved. A single whiff of lion scent, carried to a prey animal by a shift in wind, will produce an immediate alarm response, even if the prey never sees or hears the lion. This is why wind direction is so central to how lions hunt. It is not an incidental factor. It is structurally determining. A lion that is upwind of prey cannot approach them. The scent will reach them before the lion does, and the hunt is over before it began. The entire logic of the approach must be organized around maintaining a downwind or crosswind position relative to the prey, and this constraint shapes every decision about direction, timing, and route. At night, wind patterns on the savanna are somewhat more complex than during the day. Daytime heating creates convective air movement, warm air rising, cooler air flowing in to replace it, that produces a generally consistent directional wind in many areas. At night, as the ground cools, these convective patterns weaken. Wind near the ground can become more variable, shifting direction more frequently, carrying scent in less predictable patterns. In some topographies, katabatic drainage winds develop as cool air flows downslope along drainage channels and valleys. A lion hunting in these conditions has to work with shifting information. A wind that was favorable 5 minutes ago may have swung in a direction that exposes the lion's scent to the prey it has been approaching. The choice at that point, continue regardless, redirect the approach, wait for the wind to shift again, is made on information that is only partially available. The lion does not know with certainty what the prey can smell. It does not know exactly when its own scent crossed the nose of the nearest prey animal. It is working with probabilities and incomplete data, as all animals always are. Vision in prey animals at night is a more nuanced subject than is sometimes presented. It is common to see lions described as having dramatically superior night vision compared to their prey, in a way that implies prey animals are essentially blind in the dark. This overstates the case. Many savanna ungulates have visual systems that are also adapted for low light function, though generally to a lesser degree than those of cats. They also have a tapetum lucidum. The same reflective layer that enhances lion night vision is present in horses, zebra, most bovids, and many other ungulate families. Their photoreceptor distribution may favor rod density in ways that support low light function. They do not have the same degree of night vision enhancement as lions, but they are not operating in complete darkness from a visual standpoint. More importantly, prey animals have a specific visual advantage that cats do not: a wide visual field. The position of the eyes on the head of most prey ungulates, positioned to the sides rather than forward-facing as in cats, produces a visual field that approaches 360 degrees, particularly when you include both eyes. A zebra looking straight ahead is simultaneously seeing almost everything to its sides and slightly behind it. The binocular overlap region, where the two eyes see the same area and depth perception is possible, is relatively small compared to a predator with forward-facing eyes. But the coverage for detecting movement at a wide angle is extraordinary. This means that a lion approaching from the side is not approaching from a blind spot. It is approaching from a direction that the prey's visual system covers quite well. Not with fine detail, perhaps, but with good motion detection. The advantage the lion has is not simply that it sees the prey and the prey doesn't see it. It is more that the lion can remain still for long enough, maintain low contrast with the background, approach with small enough movements, that even in the prey's wide field of view, it does not register as a threat. The grass is a crucial element here. The long grass of the savanna provides visual disruption. It breaks up the lion's outline. It creates a foreground that obscures a body moving at grass height. It produces its own visual movement from wind that masks the movement of other things. A lion lying flat in meter-high grass is genuinely difficult to see even from a short distance, not because it is invisible, but because it blends into a background that is itself visually complex. There is a category of animal behavior on the savanna that has received considerable scientific attention in the last few decades, and which is directly relevant to the nighttime ecology we are describing. It is called the landscape of fear. The concept, developed by Joel Brown and colleagues working on foraging ecology, describes the way that prey animals modify their behavior, where they go, when they go there, how long they stay, how much they eat, based on their assessment of predation risk in different locations and at different times. The landscape of fear is the spatial map of perceived risk that a prey animal carries, and it shapes almost every decision the animal makes throughout its daily and nightly movements. At night, the landscape of fear is reconfigured. Places that are low risk during the day may become high risk at night. Open areas, which provide excellent visibility during daylight and allow prey to detect approaching predators from great distances, are the classic example. During the day, a wildebeest on an open plain has good sight lines in all directions. It can see a predator approaching from hundreds of meters away and has time to respond. At night, those same sight lines become less useful, because even with adapted eyes, visibility is reduced. A lion can approach more closely before detection becomes likely. As a result, many prey species modify their use of open habitat at night. They may avoid the most exposed areas, preferring to rest near the cover of bush edges or drainage channels where their own cover is better, or where, at least, their back is protected and threats can only approach from a limited range of directions. This is a trade-off. The same bush edge that gives the prey some cover also gives it less visual range. But for an animal that relies heavily on hearing and smell at night, reduced visual range may be an acceptable cost. The distributions of prey species across the landscape at any given hour of the night are therefore not random. They are the product of an ongoing risk assessment that each individual animal is performing continuously against a background of accumulated experience of where predators are typically found, where kills have occurred, where alarm calls have come from. The landscape of fear has memory in it, not the explicit memory of a human recalling a specific event, but the functional memory expressed in modified behavior that persists for some time after a frightening experience. Lions, living in the same landscape and maintaining the same territorial patterns over extended periods, are essentially co-authors of the fear landscape. Their regular routes, their preferred hunting areas, their typical movement patterns leave traces in the behavior of prey. Prey animals that have survived encounters with lions, or that have been present when other animals were hunted, carry that information in their behavior. They are more alert in specific areas. They cross certain open stretches more quickly. They rest in certain configurations. The lions, simply by being what they are and doing what they do, are structuring the behavior of thousands of other animals across the entire territory. The alarm call systems of savanna animals are, in their own way, as sophisticated as any communication we might describe with that word. An alarm call is not a simple signal. It is not just danger broadcast into the air. Different calls encode different information: the urgency of the threat, the type of predator, the direction, the caller's assessment of the prey's own risk level. And different species can read each other's alarms, extracting relevant information from calls produced by species they did not evolve with directly. The vervet monkey's alarm calls are one of the most studied examples of semantically distinct signals. They produce different calls for aerial predators like eagles, for ground predators like leopards, and for snakes, and other vervet monkeys respond appropriately to each call type. But the alarm call systems of many birds and mammals on the savanna are similarly differentiated, even if less extensively studied. For lions hunting at night, the most relevant systems are those of the species they are actually hunting. Zebra produce a distinctive, bark-like alarm call that functions as a sharp, localized signal. Wildebeest produce snorts and specific vocalizations. Impala produce a sharp, repeated sound, a high, percussive alarm call that carries a considerable distance and triggers attention responses in other impala and in many other species nearby. The gazelle family, which includes Thompson's gazelle and Grant's gazelle, that are common in many lion ranges, have a behavior called stotting or pronking, a high, bouncing jump performed when a predator is detected. The function of stotting has been debated, but one well-supported interpretation is that it is an honest signal to the predator. The animal performing it is demonstrating its fitness, its ability to jump and run. It signals to the lion that this particular animal is fast and in good condition, and chasing it would be inefficient. There is reasonably good evidence that predators do not preferentially pursue animals that stot, compared to animals that flee without this signal. This creates a system of communication between predator and prey that is not exactly what we think of when we use the word communication. It is not cooperative information exchange, but it is information exchange in the sense that signals are produced that change the receiver's behavior, and it has effects on outcomes, on who gets hunted and who does not, on which hunts are attempted and which are abandoned. A lion moving at night through a landscape alive with these signals is navigating something more complex than simply looking for a target. It is embedded in a network of information about the state of many animals across a wide area, and its behavior is shaped by that information, whether or not we would describe the lion as reading it in any active sense. Let's spend some time with one of the more philosophically interesting aspects of the night savanna, which is the question of what predation actually does to prey populations, and whether ruling is even the right frame for understanding the relationship. The conventional image of predator-prey dynamics is essentially one of constraint. Predators kill prey animals, which reduces prey population numbers, which puts some kind of ceiling on prey abundance. Lions kill zebra and wildebeest. Therefore, there are fewer zebra and wildebeest than there would be without lions. This is not wrong, but it is much too simple to capture what is actually happening. The relationship between lion predation and prey population dynamics is complex enough that ecologists have spent decades working through it and continue to debate specifics. What is broadly established is this. In most ecosystems where lions are present, lion predation is not the primary driver of prey population dynamics. Prey numbers are more strongly regulated by food availability, by rainfall and vegetation than they are by predation. In years of drought, prey populations crash because there is not enough grass to sustain them, not because lions kill more. In years of good rainfall, prey populations boom regardless of predation pressure. What predation does, what lion predation specifically does, is more subtle. It maintains a pressure that acts on the composition of prey populations. Lions are not random killers. They select for specific classes of individuals: the young, the old, the injured, the sick, the isolated. The specific patterns of selectivity vary by prey species and context, but the general tendency is well documented. This selectivity means that lion predation tends to remove individuals that would otherwise be at elevated risk of dying from other causes anyway, and it tends to spare the most vigorous adults in their prime. The effect on the prey population is therefore not simply reduction in numbers. It is a kind of ongoing pruning, removing animals at the margins, maintaining a population that is, on average, slightly younger and more vigorous than it would be without predation. Whether this is genuinely beneficial for the prey species, whether populations with predation are in some sense healthier than populations without, is a question that ecologists continue to work on, and the answer depends on many factors. But the simple predator removes prey frame clearly misses important dimensions of the relationship. The night as shared space. This is perhaps the most important reframe we can make. Nothing in the ecology of the savanna night supports the idea of a hierarchy in which some animals possess the night and others merely survive in it. The lions move through the darkness with advantages that are real and biologically meaningful. But the prey animals are there too, with their own adaptations, their own strategies, their own behavioral sophistication. The insects and rodents and birds and reptiles that form the rest of the nighttime community are there, each species occupying a particular niche in the temporal and spatial landscape. The savanna night is not owned, it is shared. Not peacefully, not without conflict, not without death. Death is part of every night somewhere in any functioning ecosystem. But it is shared in the sense that multiple species have claim on it, all of them shaped by it, all of them shaped by each other. The leopard that is hunting in the same region as the lion pride is not simply competing with the lions for prey. It is occupying a different micro-niche, preferring different prey sizes, hunting in denser cover, moving more cautiously and more alone than the pride. The two species coexist in the same landscape, not because they have negotiated an arrangement, but because their behavioral ecologies are different enough that they rarely directly compete. The leopard avoids lions, partly because lions will kill leopards if they encounter them. The lions rarely pursue leopards. It is energetically not worth it. The avoidance is mutual in outcome, asymmetric in motivation. The cheetah, which is also present in many of the same ecosystems as lions, has largely solved the coexistence problem by operating at a different time. Cheetahs are overwhelmingly diurnal hunters. They hunt during the day, relying on their extraordinary speed in conditions where that speed is most effective. They lose kills to lions and hyenas regularly when they are active at dawn and dusk, and they have largely retreated to the brighter hours as their operational window. This temporal niche separation means that in many landscapes, cheetahs and lions are rarely competing directly for the same prey at the same moment. The savanna night is therefore organized partly along temporal lines. Different species claim different hours, different light levels, different combinations of sensory conditions. The peak activity windows of different predator species and different prey species do not fully overlap. The result is something more like a rotating use of shared space than a winner-take-all competition for a single resource. There is something worth exploring here about sound as it relates specifically to lions. Not the sounds that other animals make that lions respond to, but the sounds lions themselves produce at night, and what those sounds do to the landscape around them. The roar, as we discussed earlier, is a long-distance signal, but it is more than territorial. When a lion roars, when a group of lions roars together, which is one of the more viscerally striking sounds that any environment can produce, the effect on everything within earshot is immediate and widespread. Prey animals that hear a lion roar at close range respond with acute alarm. The specific response varies by species and by distance. At close range, a roar can trigger immediate flight. At moderate distance, it more typically produces intense vigilance. All animals in the area freezing, heads up, ears oriented, the assessment of what to do next being made in real time. At greater distances, the response might be more subtle, a slight increase in alertness, a monitoring of subsequent sounds. But the effect ripples outward beyond the animals that hear the roar directly. When a herd of zebra freezes and then begins moving rapidly away from a roar, other animals nearby see that movement and respond to it, even if they did not hear the roar themselves. The alarm cascade works through vision and the sound of movement, as well as through direct acoustic reception of the roar. This creates a sphere of disruption around a roaring lion, a zone in which prey behavior is altered, in which animals are moving, in which the normal pattern of the night is interrupted. A lion on a patrol that is vocalizing actively is, in a sense, announcing its presence in a way that clears certain areas of prey. This might seem counterproductive for hunting, and in the immediate sense it is. But it serves the territorial function. Other lions know where these animals are, and the territorial message is being delivered. And the disruption may eventually settle, with prey returning to their previous positions, giving a hunting lion information about where prey will be in an hour's time. There is something interesting about the relationship between a lion's territorial roaring and its hunting activity on any given night. They are not seamlessly compatible. An animal that is actively advertising its presence through loud vocalization is not simultaneously hunting quietly. The two modes, the visible, assertive territorial animal and the invisible, patient hunter, are distinct behavioral states. Lions switch between them, and the switching is influenced by many factors, including social context, the presence of other pride members, the current state of the territory, and probably internal physiological states that we cannot directly observe. The hyena is present in all of this, and it deserves more than the brief mention it has received so far. Because in the nighttime ecology of the savanna, hyenas and lions are in a relationship that is more complex and interesting than simple competition. Spotted hyenas are primarily nocturnal. Their peak activity is in the dark hours, and they are, in every functional sense, as much night animals as lions are. Their sensory systems are adapted for darkness. Their eyes have a tapetum lucidum. Their hearing is acute. Their sense of smell is extraordinary. A hyena's nose is one of the most sensitive olfactory instruments in the mammalian world. They can detect the scent of a carcass from distances of several kilometers under good conditions. They can follow scent trails. They navigate their environment in part through a dense, continuously updated olfactory map of their range. Hyena clans and lion prides often overlap in their territories, and the interactions between them are ongoing and multi-directional. Lions steal hyena kills. When a hyena clan has made a kill and lions are present, the lions can generally displace the hyenas if they arrive in sufficient numbers. Hyenas steal lion kills. When a pride has made a kill and leaves it, or is insufficient in number to defend it, hyenas will take the carcass. The two species are in constant low-level competition for food resources across the night. But the relationship also has elements of something more like parallel activity than direct competition. Hyenas and lions often know where each other are, through sound, through scent, through the visual detection that is possible under the conditions of darkness both species navigate. They sometimes travel in the same general directions, both responding to the same attractants: a herd of prey, a distant sound of distress from an animal that may be injured, the scent of a kill that was made by a third party. They are navigating the same information landscape, using many of the same signals. In some documented cases, the presence of hyenas has actually provided lions with information about prey. A running hyena clan, moving in a specific direction, may indicate that prey are nearby. The hyenas are responding to detection of prey that the lions have not yet registered. Whether lions use this incidental information intentionally is hard to say, but it is available to them, and animals that take advantage of available information tend to do better than those that do not. The rodent community of the savanna at night is worth a brief acknowledgement, because it represents an enormous amount of biological activity that is occurring simultaneously with all of the large mammal drama, and is largely invisible to anyone focused on lions and their prey. Rats, mice, gerbils, spring hares, various species of mongoose, the small mammal community of the savanna comes into its own at night. Many of these species are strict nocturnals. They emerge from burrows and shelters at or after dark, spend the night foraging, and return before dawn. The combined foraging activity of these animals, the seeds consumed, the insects predated, the fungi consumed, the vegetation cropped, is ecologically significant at the landscape level, even if no individual animal's impact seems large. This community has its own predators: owls, genets, servals, small carnivores. The barn owl's hearing is sensitive enough to allow it to locate and strike prey in complete darkness. It can hunt in conditions where even its own eyes are insufficient, using sound alone to localize a rustling mouse under leaf litter. The serval, a medium-sized cat, is specialized for hunting in tall grass and has proportionally enormous ears that allow it to detect small mammals moving beneath the grass surface. The lions moving through the savanna at night are not participating in this level of the food web. They are too large to hunt mice, and the energetic return would be negligible. But they are moving through an environment that is, at smaller scales, incredibly active. Every square meter of savanna at night contains more life in motion than is visible to any observer. The nighttime activity of the large mammals, lions, zebra, wildebeest, hyenas, occurs in a context of vast, largely invisible, small-scale activity that is as integral to the savanna's function as anything happening at the large mammal level. Let's talk about water briefly, because it organizes nighttime movement on the savanna in ways that shape everything else. Water sources, rivers, seasonal pans, permanent water holes, are not simply places where animals drink. They are nodes around which the social geography of the savanna is organized. Prey must drink, typically at least once a day, more often during hot and dry periods. This necessity creates predictable movement, regular routes between grazing areas and water sources, repeated at similar times, across multiple days and weeks. Predators know about these routes. They know where the water sources are in their territory, and they know the patterns of prey movement associated with them. Water holes at night are places where visibility is often somewhat better. Open ground around the water, less grass cover. But they are also places where prey are concentrated and their attention is divided between drinking and watching for threats. Lions hunt at water holes. Not always, not primarily, but water holes are recognized hunting locations. The approach conditions are specific to each water hole. the cover available, the wind patterns, the typical prey arrival times, the sight lines from different directions. A pride that has lived in a territory for several years has accumulated knowledge of each waterhole's specific character. They know which side provides better cover for an approach, which direction prey typically arrive from, what level of moonlight changes the tactical situation. At the waterhole, everything we have discussed, the visual adaptation, the patience, the coordination, the energy management, the reading of prey behavior, comes together in conditions that are particularly demanding. The prey are alert. They have to come to the water regardless of predation risk, but they come cautiously, checking the area before approaching, often sending a few individuals forward first, while the majority of the herd waits at a distance. The few individuals at the water are vulnerable, but they are also more alert than at any other moment. Alarm travels from water to herd and back at close range. Successful hunts at waterholes require everything the lion has. All the patience and all the precision and all the integration of information from multiple senses simultaneously. They are not common compared to open ground hunts, but they happen. There is a quality of the nighttime savanna that is easy to miss in any description that focuses on specific behaviors and species interactions. It is the quality of continuity. The night does not have a plot. It does not move from complication toward resolution. It does not build toward a conclusion. It simply proceeds in all its complexity, with all its millions of simultaneous events and interactions, none of which is more central than any other from the perspective of the ecosystem as a whole. A lion that makes a kill tonight does not complete the night's story. A zebra that evades a hunt and grazes through to dawn has not won the night's story. The story, such as it is, continues in every direction, beyond any frame we can put around it. What we observe when we watch a night on the savanna is always a fragment, a small section of something vast. The pride of lions we have been following is one of dozens of prides spread across hundreds of kilometers of ecosystem. Each of those prides is doing something tonight: hunting, resting, socializing, marking territory, responding to competitors, raising young. Each of them is embedded in a specific local landscape with its own prey populations and competitor species, and water sources and vegetation patterns. And around all of them, the ecosystem continues. The grass grows, consumes nutrients from soil, returns them when it dies and decomposes. The insects process organic material. The birds, roosting now and mostly silent, will begin calling before first light and will spend the day doing work that is as essential to the ecosystem as anything the lions do. The fungi network below the soil surface, the mycorrhizal connections between plant root systems, continues operating regardless of anything happening above ground. The lions are significant. Their presence matters ecologically, demonstrably, but they are not the center of the system. Nothing is the center of the system. It is a network, and networks do not have centers in the way that stories do. There is one more thing worth exploring before the night ends, or rather, before we allow it to continue without us. We have been talking about what the night asks of lions and what it asks of prey animals. But there is a sense in which the night itself, not as a metaphor, not as a character, but as a set of physical conditions, makes specific kinds of behavior possible that the day does not. Darkness, as a physical condition, is a reduction in energy. The sun is the source of most of the energy that moves through biological systems, and its absence changes things. temperature drops, photosynthesis stops. The specific wavelengths of light that drive the visual systems of diurnal animals are not present. These are not dramatic catastrophes. They are regular, predictable changes that every species in the ecosystem has adapted to in its own way. But the adaptation to darkness is not simply a matter of coping with a disadvantage. For the species that have evolved to use the night, that have made their lives in its specific conditions, darkness is not a deficit, it is a resource. It provides cover. It reduces the energetic cost of temperature regulation. It changes the balance of detectability between predators and prey in specific ways that have shaped both. It creates conditions in which certain behaviors, the patient stalk, the long-distance roar, the collective vigilance of a mixed prey herd relying on hearing and smell, are more functional than they would be in full daylight. The night is not simply the absence of day. It is its own kind of environment, with its own physical properties and its own community of species shaped by those properties. The lions that rule it, if we want to keep using that word, and by now it should be clear how qualified that word has to be, rule it, not by conquering its conditions, but by fitting into them, by being exactly what the night needs them to be in order to function as lions. Before the first light comes, there is a period of particular quiet. Not. The silence of nothing happening. Nothing of the kind exists on a functioning savanna, but a relative quiet as the deep night insects reach the lower range of their temperature-related activity and before the first birds begin their pre-dawn calling. The mammals that have been active all night are beginning to settle, or are already settled. The lions, if they have hunted and fed, are in their post-feeding rest. If they have not made a kill, they may be in a final period of watchful rest, or still moving slowly and without specific direction, the hunting window closing and the body shifting toward a rest state in anticipation of the warming day. The darkness at this hour is not quite as complete as it was at midnight. There is, on clear nights, a faint brightening in the east, too subtle to register consciously, but registered by the biological systems of many animals whose circadian rhythms are sensitive to the earliest changes in sky luminance. Hormones that have been in nighttime configurations begin to shift. The long, slow internal tide of biology turns, starting the process of transitioning back toward the diurnal mode. For the lions, this means the slow return of the deep rest that their bodies have been withholding through the active hours. The alertness that characterized even their resting periods during the night begins to relax into something heavier. They are settling into the ground now, not watching it from above. Somewhere to the east, the first bird, perhaps a robin chat, perhaps a francolin, the specific species depending on the region and the season, produces a single call, then stops, then produces it again. The night, which has been continuous, is beginning to develop a seam. The cubs of the pride are asleep in a compact group, limbs overlapping, the specific arrangement of small bodies that is their own kind of warmth. An adult female lies nearby, not quite asleep, one ear still oriented outward toward the landscape. Her body is relaxed, her breathing is slow. She is present in the specific way that lions are present, fully committed to the moment, without needing anything from it, without pushing toward the next thing or away from the last. The stars, which have been tracking west through the night, are paler now. The air, which was cool and still an hour ago, has developed the faintest suggestion of morning movement. Air, beginning to stir, as the differential between cold ground and the still dark but slowly changing sky creates the earliest hints of a new convective cycle. The impala that were alert through the deep night are still alert. They will remain alert until the light is sufficient to trust their vision again, until the long night's particular version of danger has definitively passed, and the day's different version has not yet fully arrived. The liminal period at dawn is its own category of heightened vigilance for prey animals. It is neither night nor day, neither the darkness-adapted mode nor the light-adapted mode. We have been talking for a long time now about the night, about what it contains, what it requires, what it produces, about the lions at the center of our attention, and the vast community of other animals that share the darkness with them. And at ZzScience, that is really the point of these long, slow explorations. Not to arrive at a conclusion, not to tie things up into a lesson or a moral, but to spend time with a real place, and real animals, and real biological systems, in a way that is patient enough to let their actual complexity come through. The savanna night is not a metaphor. It is not an allegory for human experience. It is just what it is. A specific set of conditions, producing specific behaviors, in a collection of specific species that have been shaped by their relationships to each other, over timescales that make any individual night vanishingly small. But spending time with it changes something, or it can. The patience of the lions is not inspirational in any direct sense. They are not patient because they have chosen patience as a virtue. They are patient because their biology, shaped by evolution, produces patience as an effective strategy. There is no lesson to extract from that directly. But there is something in the extended observation of it, in the hours spent watching animals that do not hurry, that do not perform, that simply are what they are in the darkness, that has its own value. The night continues. Somewhere in the grass, a lion is still watching. Somewhere across the plain, a herd is still listening. The stars are almost gone. The savanna goes on.